Nicolas Maduro has arrived in New York less than 24 hours after being plucked from his home in the Venezuelan capital alongside his wife in an audacious US military operation. Now, for Venezuelans, the question now remains, what happens now? Donald Trump has answered the US will take control. Our US correspondent, James Matthews, reports.
In the darkness of a New York airfield, this was the American end of a most high-profile arrest. Slowly, Nicolas Maduro was walked off a military plane after being flown to face American justice. Handcuffed and with his head covered, this was a fugitive delivered for onward passage into the US court system by order of Donald Trump. Maduro was escorted into a hangar surrounded by federal agents. Then he was transferred to a helicopter and his journey continued towards a detention centre in Brooklyn. Not before he stopped by the Drugs Enforcement Agency. This was a presidential perp walk. He came with good wishes. Happy New Year, he said. However unhappy it was for him.
Happy New Year.
This was Operation Absolute Resolve. The US used technology to turn off the lights in downtown Caracas as troops moved in to move out a sitting president. Inside the compound of Nicolas Maduro, he was caught as he tried to make his way to a steel-reinforced safe room. He was arrested with his wife and taken to the USS Iwo Jima for onward transport to New York. The man they call a narco-terrorist will face drug-running charges.
It was an assault like people have not seen since World War II.
Donald Trump didn't underplay the operational success. He'd watched from a situation room, makeshift, in Mar-a-Lago. Maduro, he said, had been bum-rushed by US forces as he tried to flee. For the Americans, it was a result, no question. At a Mar-a-Lago news conference...
Okay, thank you very much. This is big stuff.
The question was what happens next.
Appreciate you being here. We are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about.
He was asked about boots on the ground, a US military presence. He didn't say no.
Well, you know, they always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it, but we're going to make sure that that country is run properly. We're not doing this in vain.
Maduro is the Venezuelan president long accused of authoritarianism, subverting democracy and abusing human rights. To the Trump administration, he's a narco-terrorist running drugs into the United States. For weeks, it's targeted boats it said were conducting the illicit trade. It's also pursued sanctioned tankers at sea, choking Venezuela's oil trade, the very business President Trump is now eyeing for profit. There were demonstrations in Caracas in support of the seized president. In his news conference, Donald Trump said the vice president had been sworn into the top job. But at the National Assembly, she backed the boss who'd been snatched.
Solo venezolano, ni una venezolana.
The extremist that has promoted this armed violence against our country will pay. History and justice will make them pay. We have no doubt.
Hay un solo presidente en este país.
There is only one president in this country, and he is called Nicolas Maduro Moros.
The hour of freedom has arrived. That was the verdict of Venezuela's opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado. Many saw her as a natural successor, but not so Donald Trump.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within, or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect to be the leader.
There is uncertainty at what comes next for Venezuela, and concern. That extends to members of Congress here in Washington who weren't consulted before the military action. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that was down to operational secrecy. Opposition Democrats have condemned what they say is a plan to occupy Venezuela. In New York, the United Nations Secretary General has expressed a deep concern that international law could have been breached. And then there's a question of precedent. What other countries aren't aligned with Donald Trump? Who else could conceivably be next? After the events of Saturday morning, Donald Trump was asked about Cuba. He replied, "I think Cuba is going to be something we end up talking about." His actions have changed the conversation. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
Well, the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife is a significant escalation of what's been months of threats and military build-up. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has been looking at what we know so far about the American military operation.
The operation to topple Nicolas Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela, began in the early hours after days of waiting for the right weather. The US issued aviation warnings for a huge amount of airspace across the whole country and far out to sea. And then the airstrikes began. Witnessed in Caracas, the capital, but at the port of La Guaira and the regions of Miranda and Aragua as well. Explosions in Caracas lit up the night sky, but the silhouettes of helicopters believed to be American can also be seen crossing the picture here. Now, this footage shows the size of the explosion at the port of La Guaira. And further east at the airport of La Higuerote, yet more spectacular pyrotechnics. America's most senior military commander described the complexity of the military operation overnight.
In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones.
Now, this is where Nicolas Maduro is thought to have been captured, his presidential palace. Donald Trump said it was like a fortress. He says all of Venezuela's military capacity has now been destroyed. This daylight footage shows what's left of an army base outside the capital, Caracas. And the US president has hinted at some kind of US presence in the country for the foreseeable future.
We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place.
Donald Trump is, it seems, all in, having captured Venezuela's leader. He is committing his administration to Venezuela's future and what sounds like an American occupation of the country. He says he wants to make Venezuela great again. Exactly how that will play out, though, is far from clear.
Well, the US government has defended its controversial decision to extract Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela to make him face a court in the US. But was this operation legal? Let's speak to Claire Finkelstein, Professor of National Security Law and the Director of the Centre for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania. Thanks for your company, Claire. Really appreciate it. So is there any basis, Claire, under international law for the action that occurred?
Unfortunately, it's a blatantly illegal action. As much as one would love Maduro to have gone away of his own accord, he's a brutal dictator, committed many, many crimes, and the superseding indictment that was dropped was well put together and details many terrible actions over the years. But unfortunately, there's something called international sovereignty. You can't just go into another country and remove the head of state of that country and bring them into your country to stand trial, even under circumstances in which you believe they have falsified an election. There are non-democratic countries around the world with heads of state who were not democratically elected. Putin, a great friend of Donald Trump's, at least at times it seems, is not fully democratically elected. The elections in that country are often described as illegitimate, and yet we don't see Donald Trump going into Russia and removing Vladimir Putin. So in general, we don't think that the boundaries of countries can be so easily breached. In this case, we ratcheted up actions against Venezuela in a kind of bootstrapping effort to make it look as though we were at war with that country. But the war was really of our own making.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's another side to this, and it's the UN Charter that prohibits states from attacking another without provocation. Legally, can you talk us through that issue also?
Correct. So under Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, there is no justification for use of force unless one is acting in self-defense. We don't have a claim under the UN Charter and acting in self-defense, even if we believe that Venezuela has been flooding the U.S. with cocaine. And by the way, our major drug problem has been fentanyl, not cocaine. And so there's some problems with the claim there. But there has to be an urgency to the action. There's also, in addition to international law, a domestic side of the legal problems, which is that President Trump did not go to Congress. And that's a very different kind of legal problem. But the only justification for proceeding to use military force like this in an act of war, which it was against Venezuela, without consulting Congress, is if you literally don't have time to go for the security of the country. And there was no imminence here. It was not necessary for us to use force that quickly or that imminently. Congress could have been consulted. Many, many weeks went into the planning of this event. And while there's a concern about leakage, as President Trump indicated, and I can understand that, it doesn't make the proceeding without informing Congress, without getting congressional authorization legal.
And Professor, the other side of this is that Donald Trump, in that press conference that the world saw, he said that he would run Venezuela for the time being. Legally, where does he stand there?
He has no legal justification for announcing suddenly that the U.S. is going to be running another sovereign nation. And in particular, if we're concerned about democracy building, which I point out Donald Trump was against, the America First crowd was that he supports and that was part of his base, was really against the democracy building efforts of his predecessor. And many Democratic predecessors before him. But if you're really concerned about getting rid of dictators so that democracy can flourish, it's very important that it be a matter of self-determination for the Venezuelan people. So we ought not to be stepping in and running Venezuela. I should point out also that Pete Hegseth, who was one of the individuals in the Trump administration who is named as having a role in running Venezuela, as having difficulty running his own Department of War. So I'm not sure that he'll be very adept at running Venezuela.
Professor, it's fair to say, isn't it, that you believe that the Trump administration have broken the law. Who will stop them?
Unfortunately, international law is very difficult to enforce. The ICC would be a matter of war crimes, but it doesn't have much standing. And these days, particularly in the United States, the ICJ could hear a case, and there may well be, I can imagine there will be cases brought in the ICJ, but those take a very, very long time. And of course, there's no enforcement mechanism. And the U.S. feels free to ignore international law and has for many, many years. And so it's very, very difficult to enforce international law. Congress is to blame for taking a back seat, allowing presidential authority to overrun its container and to be passive in the face of executive overreach. It's really critical that Congress step up to the plate and take some responsibility here. But from the way that members of Congress were sounding today, there was not universal condemnation of this action. And so I very much doubt that we're going to see an activated Congress on this matter.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Professor Claire Finkelstein, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
OK, let's take a look at some of the day's other stories now. British forces have bombed a suspected weapons stockpile previously used by Islamic State in Syria. RAF Typhoons deployed guided bombs in a joint operation with the French Air Force, targeting the site in Palmyra last night. Now, the MOD said the operation aimed to help prevent any attempted resurgence of the terrorist movement. A convicted murderer is one of two prisoners being hunted by police after escaping from HMP Leyhill north of Bristol on New Year's Day. 35-year-old Matthew Armstrong, on the left, was convicted in 2009 of a murder that occurred during a robbery. Police are also searching for 40-year-old Daniel Washbourne, pictured on the right, who has a history of violent offences. Police in Switzerland say two managers of the bar where the deadly New Year's fire broke out are under criminal investigation. At least 40 people were killed and more than 100 others in the blaze in the resort of Montana. And from there, Sky's Rob Harris sent this report.
The distress is unbearable, not knowing who died or survived. And while families are still searching for loved ones, they're also still searching for answers about whether this tragedy could have been prevented. In front of a growing memorial in Montana, criminal proceedings were announced into two managers of the bar, accused of involuntary homicide, involuntary bodily harm, and involuntarily causing a fire.
It's incredibly emotional to see the place and realize how strong the power of these flames must have been. Even on the top floor where I could enter, you can smell it, you can see the damage.
Feared to have been caused by sparklers igniting the ceiling.
Are you putting enough safety measures into Swiss bars? Are your safety checks enough?
This is exactly one of these questions that we have to answer now, and there will be answers when we have all the information.
Such as the severity of the injuries, it's taken police more than 2 days to tell us they've identified the first victims of the inferno.
Among the 40 who died are a boy and girl, both aged 16, as well as an 18-year-old man and 21-year-old woman. There are also believed to be 120 others with injuries. Edonit has been trying to contact his friend Stefan Ivanovic, La Constellation's security guard.
I sent him a message telling him that I love him and that we are waiting for some news.
But no reply?
No reply.
Tristan P2's family has been searching hospitals, issuing public pleas for help.
It's unacceptable for a parent to wait so long. We need to know if he's alive or not. We are begging. If any doctor, any nurse had one injured person with 4 incisors removed, please, they need to contact us because for sure it will be him.
As Switzerland mourns, many families can't even start grieving yet. Rob Harris, Sky News, Montana in the Swiss Alps.
OK, we're heading for a short break now, but when we return, we'll be talking about a solidarity rally that's being held in London. It's in support of ongoing anti-regime protests in Iran.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
Are you an appeaser for Putin?
I think that I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? Does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over. Full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor. I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Iran's supreme leader says rioters must be put in their place. This is following a week of protests that have rocked the Islamic Republic. Now, the comments will likely embolden security forces to crack down on demonstrators. Here in the UK, a protest was held yesterday, marking a year since a British couple was taken captive in Iran on espionage charges. Sky's Dan Whitehead reports.
Oh, stand by me.
Exactly 1 year on, and a song for freedom. The family and supporters of Lindsay and Craig Foreman marched on Downing Street. The British couple had been on a motorcycle tour of the world when they were detained in Iran on suspicion of espionage, something they've always denied. Their son delivered a 70,000-strong petition calling for tougher action from the British government.
It's gone quick, but it's been the most traumatic and long time of all of our lives, right? I think today is about trying to unite people and showing that solidarity is the way forward. The main purpose is to hold the government accountable. The fact that they're both being accused of espionage for the British state and the state that they're being accused of spying for aren't coming out in public to defend them, I think is criminal, really.
One man who knows Joe's pain all too well is Richard Ratcliffe. His wife Nazanin was released in 2022 after being held by Iranians for 6 years.
It brings back tough memories of what we went through and how long it lasted and how you need to keep going. It's nice to be here and to be reminded of how many people cared for us, how many people care for Lindsay and Craig, and the importance of just keeping going and keeping alive the idea that one day it'll be different.
The Foreign Office says it is deeply concerned and is continuing to raise the Foreman's case with Iranian authorities.
The delivery of this petition comes amid growing tensions in Iran itself. Protests have been escalating throughout the week, sparked by political anger over an economic crisis there.
At least 10 people have died in clashes in Iran that have spread beyond the capital, Tehran. Anger over the state of Iran's economy, battered by years of sanctions. It follows US President Donald Trump's pledge to rescue protesters caught up, remarks the Iranian regime say escalate tensions in the region.
The uncontrolled rise in foreign exchange rates and the lack of stability in rates and constant fluctuations is not normal. It makes sellers and merchants unable to work. This is done by the enemy.
Back in London, political demonstrations over the ongoing unrest were held outside Downing Street. Protest that shows no sign of stopping in Iran is spreading further afield. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Westminster.
OK, let's take a look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Strong northerly winds have brought bitterly cold Arctic air this weekend, leading to widespread frosts and wintry hazards. And there are multiple snow and ice warnings in force, especially for northern Scotland, and frequent heavy snow showers, blizzard conditions and drifting snow could cause travel disruption and power outages. And there are also warnings for snow and ice for island Wales, eastern coast of England and the southwest as wintry showers push in.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Yeah, Jackie's here. It was bitterly cold outside, but inside Ali Pali, well, Luke Littler...
I think it was quite cold there,
raised the roof, didn't he?
Somebody was saying that it's actually really cold on the stage at Ali Pali, but yeah, his dance was scorching hot last night. I had a funny scenario in my house where 2 tellies on 2 different rooms, everybody's watching darts. Like everybody, that would never have happened a few years ago. It's extraordinary.
Totally.
The Luke Littler effect. That people go, what's going to happen in this final? Well, we could have kind of predicted it. He is once again the world darts champion. We're going to be hearing from him after the break. Also, Arsenal win again as Declan Rice scores twice on his return from injury to beat Bournemouth, and he is man of the match.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
Are you an appeaser for Putin?
I think that I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? Did your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week.
There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Venezuela's captured President Nicolas Maduro has arrived in the US. Well, he'll face drugs charges. But who is Maduro? Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, has been looking at his life.
This was Nicolas Maduro and his wife just a few days ago, looking relaxed and smiling.
Un acuerdo de combate contra el narcotráfico
He tells his interviewer he was open to closer cooperation with Donald Trump. He has now, it seems, been deposed and he's on his way to an uncertain fate.
Not war, just peace, forever, forever, forever.
Whatever the future brings, Nicolas Maduro may be remembered most for pictures like these. A leader who danced as Venezuela's economy sank deeper and American warships advanced on his country.
Not war, not war, not war. Just peace, just peace, just peace, forever, forever, forever. Peace forever.
His brazen swagger was with him till the end. Here a few months ago, claiming he was bigger than Taylor Swift.
Soy más famoso que Taylor Swift en Estados Unidos ahorita.
But Nicolas Maduro will go down in history as the man who took a nation with enormous oil wealth and potential and left it ruined. For much of his life, though, he was in the shadow of this man, revolutionary socialist firebrand Hugo Chavez, who upturned Venezuela with radical changes in the early 2000s, nationalizing its oil industry and reducing poverty. Before Chavez died, he made Maduro his successor. But Nicolas Maduro had none of his mentor's charisma or popularity. He was despised by many in Venezuela's elites as a poor substitute. To maintain power, he would rely more and more not on competence, but repression. In elections in 2015, Maduro lost his majority in parliament, but he refused to stand down. In 2016, Maduro's fortunes took a turn for the worse when the man who would become his nemesis was elected US president. Donald Trump imposed swingeing sanctions. The Venezuelan economy went from bad to catastrophic, and 7 million people would end up fleeing its collapse. In widespread protests in 2017, more than 100 people died. Opposition groups claimed thousands were also killed by the secret police and in jails. But Nicolas Maduro appeared unmoved. Even after this attempt on his life, with exploding drones in 2018, which was blamed on rogue elements inside the country, behind the scenes opponents were plotting, hoping for his downfall. Led by this man, Juan Guaido, who declared Maduro illegitimate and himself acting president instead, he was recognized by the US and others. His fortunes turned again thanks to events halfway around the world, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. When the West stopped buying Russian oil, it turned to Venezuela and its vast reserves instead. Maduro was allowed back in, out of the cold. That may have emboldened him to pull off one of the biggest election frauds in Latin American history. In elections in 2024, the opposition is thought by most observers to have won a landslide. But Maduro again refused to give up power, declaring victory unconvincingly. Then in America, Donald Trump was re-elected and he branded Maduro a narco-terrorist. He then sent powerful elements of America's Navy to the Caribbean coast to threaten him. Trump's campaign against Maduro has been unrelenting with a massive naval buildup. At first, it was aimed at Venezuela's narco-trafficking operations. At least 30 small boats destroyed, allegedly for drug running, but with little evidence to prove the claims. Then oil tankers were seized, accused of breaking international sanctions. Just last month, it seemed like business as usual in Caracas, though it was in many ways a veneer of normality. Markets were open and people were going about their Christmas shopping. Most Venezuelans I spoke to said they didn't think the United States would ever do anything at all.
They will always try to lay their hands on Venezuela's riches, but they won't get away with it, because here we have strong people who are ready to put up a fight.
But beyond the buzzing shopping districts, the scars of Maduro's broken legacy were everywhere.
I used to make 90 bolivares a day. You could afford life. Cheap food, really cheap. There were plenty of jobs. You'd be happy, you'd have money. Now there is no life.
When he came into power, he promised to continue with the vision of a socialist state that would help everyone. But this is what it had come down to for some. A life on the streets, searching through rubbish for anything of value. Millions of Venezuelans wanted, or as they said, needed, something to change. The coming hours and days will be crucial for Venezuela, wherever they lead.
The hard part's going to be, how do you do transitional justice? How do you reinstitutionalize a country that has had its institutions beggared for 25 years? It's going to be difficult. How do you rebuild an economy that they have destroyed systematically, almost as if on purpose? This is a big moment for President Trump. It's an extraordinary action, the tactical action. The fact that they were able to capture Maduro without killing him is quite extraordinary. Now what happens? That's the question we all have.
Maduro's years of rampant kleptocracy leave the country racked with massive economic inequality, its resources robbed and its institutions dismantled. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has been clear that her party is ready to take the reins. Though Donald Trump has claimed Nicolas Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez has already been sworn in to replace him. Whatever happens next, it will be an enormous challenge to get Venezuela back on the road to recovery. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News.
Well, let's speak now to Greg Swenson, a Republican commentator. Thanks so much for being with us, Greg. Let's take you right back to the beginning then. What did you make of the planning and the execution of this operation?
Well, it was really incredible. I mean, really, at any point, it made you very proud to be an American, the way that this execution occurred. Like it wasn't just incredible planning, but the fact that everything went without really any kind of blip is pretty incredible. I mean, this was a fascinating moment in South American and any American history.
And President Trump has accused Maduro of being a narco-terrorist. What do you say to voices and people that criticise the legal basis for this operation?
Yeah, I find it amazing, the people who criticize, that argument. It's amazing how the left, many on the radical left, have come to defend Maduro and defend the drug cartels, to defend people who are killing not just Americans, but killing Venezuelans as well. So I find that amazing, and good for President Trump for ignoring that criticism from the progressive radical left.
And from where you sit in Florida, how is this being received by Americans?
Yeah, it's a great question, Leah, and the overwhelming response has been positive, especially from Venezuelans. And I'm here in Florida. If you go to Miami right now, the response is overwhelming. There's such a great, not only Venezuelan immigrant crowd in Miami, but Cuban as well. And so, they kind of sit in the same camp that, they've lived through communism and Marxism and are just absolutely thrilled that this has happened thanks to President Trump.
And Greg, I know that you pin this a lot on the Monroe doctrines. How do we explain this in 2026? How do we link that?
Yeah, no, it's also a great question, Leah, and I think that the president has reestablished in many ways the Monroe doctrine that look, this is our hemisphere in many arguments or in many respects. And so, it might be a different flavor in the Middle East, it might be a different flavor in other parts of the world where there are American interests, and we are very much looking after our allies around the world. But in this hemisphere, in the West, or the Western Hemisphere, you really have to think of it differently. And this, again, as you pointed out, goes back to the Monroe Doctrine. It goes back to Teddy Roosevelt, where, okay, this might be a different argument in Europe or the Middle East or in Asia, but in the Western Hemisphere, in South and Latin America, this is the American hemisphere, and that's a different argument for any kind of geopolitical discussion.
And the next question then, Greg, is all about what happens next. President Trump has said, actually, the US will run Venezuela for now. Delcy Rodrigo is stepping up to the plate. Are you confident that the US can rebuild the economy, that can get oil flowing in the right places?
Yes, I am. And I think, there's a couple of different reasons, again, why it's different than, let's say, Afghanistan or Libya or Iraq, is that, Venezuela first of all, was a very rich country. Only a few decades ago, it was the wealthiest country in South America. They had enormous oil assets. So they're poised for, let's argue economic comfort, but also, they're ready for democracy. They had elections in the last few years, and in many ways they're, again, different than some of the countries in the Middle East where we've had some regime change over the last few decades. This is a country that is really ripe and ready for democracy and has enormous oil wealth. And I think in many respects can go back to being a wealthy country like they were before communism came to Venezuela.
OK, really interesting to get your take this morning. That's Greg Swenson, a Republican commentator.
Thanks, Leah.
OK, well, Jack is here to talk sport, but there's only one, for me, really, big story. And it's
going to say Arsenal.
Well, actually, I'm very happy with Arsenal. But Luke Littler, Jackie.
Yes, world champion again last night at Ali Pali, and it was incredible. I think everyone expected him to win over Jan van Veen because it was his first world final, and this was Luke Littler's third world final. But he's won it on the bounce, and he did it in such style last night, 7 sets to 1. And the thing was, Van Veen won the first set, and you thought, oh, we're going to have a really good battle on our hands here. But you know what? He had opportunities after that to win other sets. And the thing with Luke Littler is he doesn't make many mistakes. So when he makes a mistake, you've got to really put the hammer down. You've got to make the most of it. And Van Veen couldn't do that. And he finished in real style last night. There were nervous moments. The wasp came out well and was flying around his head at one point. It didn't even put him off. He still won that set. And he is the first dance player to win £1 million prize money at the World Championships. He walked away with that last night. He's won back-to-back world titles. He's the youngest player ever to do that. And he's only the 4th man ever to do that. So he's sort of racking up these records one by one. And, he's 18. He's just passed his driving test, bought his first car. He was asked what he would do with the money, and he didn't know.
Well, that's fair enough, isn't it? He's got quite a lot in the bank already.
Yeah, and it's a relentless season for them now. There's so many events for them. So he will now go on later this month and play in Bahrain, and then, interestingly, go and play darts in Saudi Arabia in front of a crowd where there is no alcohol. I mean, contrast that to last night at Ali Pali, where everyone was having the greatest social time ever, dressed as a traffic cone or whatever. That will be very, very different. Can you still bring out your best darts when it's going to be very quiet? Anyway, lots of experience is still to come for him, but he's now got the experience of winning it back to back. Let's have a look at the action.
The club made a great pitch to me, that they wanted me. They gave me a 4-year contract. All the stops were out. They made me feel really welcome.
We arrived at the airport there in Madrid, and there were 50 journalists, cameras, and we thought, oh, they come for this movie star, Suddenly we see, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, it's for you.
It's always difficult losing a great player. Jimmy, for me, was always a world-class striker. Probably not talked about as much, I don't think, as to some of the other great strikers, but I was fortunate enough to play with him.
We obviously made a very good profit on him. If you just take the business transaction, not the football emotion, the transaction was a good deal because we bought him for 2 and we sold him for £12 million.
In 2 years, got 6 times their money. I was not a big earner at the time at the club. So for them, it was a big gain.
He's settling into his new surrounds, the player renamed Judas Floyd Money in the Bank when he was drummed out of Ellen Road. But stories of excessive demands were fictional. according to Atletico's new signing.
I was supposed to stay there. I was supposed to sign a new contract and feel happy. If they can ask 12 million for a player, the rest is all clear.
Were you asking to be the most highly paid player in the Premiership, as we're led to believe?
No, don't believe the figures at all. Don't believe the figures at all.
You didn't want £40,000 a week? Would have been nice, but is that what you were demanding?
That's not what I asked.
Reading the text last night, that was nothing about money from his agent. Well, Jesus, lads, honestly, if that wasn't about money, I don't know, then maybe I'm getting it wrong when he said me there. A lot of you have written good articles about it, and all I'd like to say is that I've seen quotes of 45,000. I think you're being modest to Jimmy on that one, honestly. I wouldn't like to say, but I think you'd be disappointed if you're only saying that, honestly.
Did you feel you had to speak out publicly for the club?
Yes, you have, because we didn't want to sell a top player. I had one of the best number 9s that you could wish to have. It puts me under pressure then. I've got to go out and buy and put your head on the block to buy a number 9. Did we sell a bad player? No, we sold the top player.
It did disappoint me. How everything went, it made me look bad in front of the fans. It was not necessary. The perception that people have of me, the difficult person, blah, 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 that is never there. I would have tried to find a solution.
What we didn't do is say he was a difficult character. I think we alluded to his desire for more money, or other people can put words around what you attribute to people who are just desperate for cash, and we couldn't afford it given we'd found him in the first place. Maybe naive on my part to believe that players wouldn't have the head turned for cash. So yeah, it was difficult, and I understand why Jimmy would think that we publicly probably let him down. But you've got to manage, and frankly I felt let down as well. We'd just signed him, I'd offered him 100% pay increase, but he wanted a 300% pay increase, and I couldn't afford it.
That was for me the fuel, that kept me going. That somebody didn't want me, and I now had in the back of my mind, I'm going to show you what you're missing.
His form has been nothing short of sensational, fueling stories that Jimmy may join the Dutch Revolution led by the former Ajax coach Louis van Gaal at Barcelona.
It would be a nice fantasy, but this is a big club and I don't see myself leaving on this moment.
I had no relegation clause. When you go to Atletico Madrid, you never think that you're going to get relegated. That never came in my mind, and it became harder and harder.
And then there was a lot of interest. A couple of clubs moved in for Jimmy. And even Barcelona made inquiries.
I had a lot of interest. Real Madrid, they were flirting a little bit. I had Valencia, and at the time Valencia were doing really well.
Glasgow Rangers was, at that time, was a big club. And they were seriously interested, and they wanted to put an offer forward.
Dick Advocaat used to be there at the time. I knew Dick from the national team. And he gave me a few calls. Come and play with us, and it's great over here, blah blah blah. But with all due respect, at the age that I was, 28, at my peak, I wasn't really thinking of going to Rangers. But that decision was made for me because.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Really appreciate that. I was thinking about Luke Littler and what kind of meal he had after that.
I'm going to guess a pizza or a kebab. Those are the two things that he likes.
Love it. Thanks, Jackie. Coming up after the break, we'll be talking, of course, about Donald Trump. And he says US oil firms will be entering Venezuela following yesterday's attack. Ed Conway will break down the numbers.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
Are you an appeaser for Putin?
I think that I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? Does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week. I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser. Oof.
OK, nothing to see here, drama over, full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor. I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Donald Trump says the US will now take control of Venezuela's oil industry. Well, back in November, our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, dug into why Mr. Trump is so interested in the resource.
Now, on the surface, Donald Trump says that his interest in Venezuela is all about drugs. But what if it's actually not about the smuggling of illegal drugs out of Venezuela, but what if it's maybe in part about oil? Now, on the surface, you might be thinking to yourself, really, does America actually need oil from anyone else? After all, look, a few years ago, this is how global production, various different countries looked, and America was kind of in the middle there, well below Saudi. Venezuela wasn't that far below America. So you might have thought that's a reasonable question a few years ago, but now, look at what's happened since. So thanks to the shale revolution, American oil output has basically gone through the roof. It's gone through the roof. And here's what's interesting about this, OK? You might have thought, looking at where Venezuela is, that, who cares? It's so small, a tiny little piddling output. Why should America care about Venezuelan crude? It comes back to the fact that crude oil, when we talk about crude oil, actually, it's lots of different things depending on where you are in the world. Now, in some parts of the world, when you kind of have that oil gushing out of the ground, it comes out of the ground looking a little bit like this. This is known as medium crude. OK, so medium crude, it's the stuff that's pretty viscous, but it's quite dark. But in some parts of the world, when it comes out of the ground, it looks almost more like a smoothie. You can see there, that's kind of green. That's still crude oil, but it's just a different type of crude oil. That's known as light crude. And sometimes, actually, it can be clear. And in other parts of the world, it comes out of the ground like this, heavy, gloopy stuff. That's known as heavy oil, OK? And here's what you need to know. In America, most of the refineries are set up to deal with this stuff, heavy oil. But most of the production in America is this stuff, the light stuff. Now, this is American production, just broken down by the type of oil. We don't normally look at this, but in this case, it's interesting. And in recent years, that's 2015, but just over the past decade, look at that light crude oil bar. That's higher and higher. Not much heavy stuff being produced in America. So because the refineries need that stuff, it needs to get it from somewhere. And so where's it getting it from? Well, look, this is showing you imports from around the world. And you can see that heavy imports, so heavy oil imports into America, have gone up from 12% in the 1970s through to 70% in 2025. And that oil, where do you get heavy oil from? Have a look at this. This is showing you the biggest countries, the biggest producers in the world of heavy oil. There's some stuff in Mexico, but look, basically, it's Russia, it's Canada, and lo and behold, it's Venezuela. This is where the heavy oil that American refineries actually need is. And if you look at where those imports in America come from, so America still needs that oil, even though it's producing lots of its own, that stuff has to go somewhere overseas. It's mostly, look, it's risen. Canada has risen from 15% in 2000 of all the imports to 61% of American imports in 2024. And if you're Donald Trump and you're thinking, I want to be less dependent on Canada, then you might well look towards this purple slice here, because although that's really small, total reserves in the ground in Venezuela are actually higher than anywhere else on the planet. And so if you can free that up, all that heavy oil, then that might be quite consequential for the US economy.
Ed Conway there. We'll have more on this story after the break. And of course, the very latest as the Venezuelan President Maduro arrives on US soil.